driven from Essex to Kent. I'm making best use of my time, as I've seen so many things, well, regularly on social media, and felt I'd like to either open a discussion or give my experience to help perhaps with some of these scenarios. So let's talk now about the child that doesn't eat anything. Oh dear, how many of these have I dealt with over the years? Well, it's a difficult one because it often stems from home, and it crops up in that first encounter with the parent. My child won't eat that. My child doesn't eat anything. My child only eats this. And I would always reassure the parent that in a group setting, children follow their friends and things don't necessarily become so difficult. But we know that's not always the case. And unfortunately, it's often the parent that's still on the bandwagon that actually doesn't support the child to be just like their friends. Because the parent is talking to us in front of their child about how they're never going to eat peas or how they don't like milk, and really that's not very helpful. So we really need to manage the parent first and foremost. We need to ensure that the parent doesn't talk about their concerns about their child eating or drinking certain milk rather than juice all the time in front of their child. It doesn't have to be a rule for that parent. In our nurseries, it was advice we gave every parent. If there was a problem, we would let them know. If we didn't let them know, then everything was fine. And where things were better than perhaps they were before, we would make sure the parent was told in front of the child to reinforce that eating of a pea today, if that was a scenario. So if parents wanted to offload about food, then they could do that via our software, or send an email or a note in to the key person. And we would encourage parents to do the same back to us as far as positive reinforcement is concerned. So, you know, if the child had tried milk at home the night before, we would love to know that information. That doesn't mean that we're going to stick a glass of milk in front of the child so they can do it with us, but certainly we would like to hear that information and be pleased about that information. Now, children will not starve. As much as their parents think that, I don't know if you can see my little dog in the background there, you know, their child is going to die because they're not eating enough. Children will not generally starve themselves, particularly tiny children. In our nurseries, food was served in a very large bowl for the younger children, or on a very large plate for the older children. I say served, we served a little bit of everything on the plate, and then when I mean a little bit, I really mean a little bit. So it could be 1 cube of carrot, 1 small potato, 1 tiny bit of meat. For the older children, we would have serving dishes on the table, so when they had finished they could have more. We never forced children to eat anything. We did encourage them to try things, and we never made children eat their first course before having their second course either. And it would be the same with their second course. We give them a very small amount, and then we give them seconds. So with the younger children, obviously we dish that up for them. But the expectation was that they, we hoped that they would eat what they had on their plate and want to have more. And it generally worked. For the child, though, that perhaps was putting their foot down and not eating, because if they haven't been used to eating at home at a table with others, or if the parent has already told you they're never going to eat at nursery, not going to get to eat anything at nursery, then the child is likely to live up to that expectation. For those children, we would still dish the food up in tiny portions, and we wouldn't make any reference to the child eating at all. We would put the child, or rather, we would sit where we were not opposite the child, so they were not in our face. We would either sit down the other end of the table or beside them, and we would enjoy our lunch. We would eat with them, and we may talk about food with the other children, but with that child we would just let them be. And when everybody else had finished their first course and we were clearing it away, then we would ask the child if they'd finished, and we would clear away the plate as well. And then we would serve the pudding in the same way. It works. A child, we never had a child that didn't eat. They always came round in the end, and obviously if they do eat something, then you're really pleased about that, and talk about the taste, perhaps the texture. Your children might be that's not appropriate, but generally I would say it probably is. You can recognise that the child has eaten something today. It wasn't that good. Now snack times, depending on whether you have a sit-down snack or a rolling snack, make sure that you do include foods that this child likes. Now, not saying that you get out the sweets. I'm not suggesting the sweets, but there are healthier crisps. There are healthier biscuits. Obviously, there's fruit and vegetables. they can be cut up in perhaps an attractive and a different way. The child might encourage the child to explore. And again, try not to give too much emphasis on the child if they don't eat. Again, with drinks, give the child a really small amount of milk or water, and then provide them with small jugs to help themselves to warm. Now, the actual activity of pouring a drink perhaps will overcome the will not to drink, because they want to put some more in their cup. So again, that's a good tactic. And snack times, can make up for the lack of eating at main meal times. Once the child is eating with you, then it's much easier to restrict perhaps the amount of food available at snack, so they're hungrier at lunch. It all has to be, tailor-made to the child's needs. But it's also important that everybody is dealing with the situation in the same way, right? There's a consistent approach to helping and support both parties, the child and parent. Now, we had one particular child with special educational needs, and she'd eat fine with us, but she wouldn't eat at home. And the parent was pulling her hair out. I mean, she was spending quite a lot of her week with us, but the parent was really having problems with it. So we actually packed up same serving dishes, same cutlery, same crockery, and the Senko did a home visit. I think she did it for a week, maybe longer, 2 weeks perhaps. And every day, when the child wasn't at nursery, she took lunch to the child, and the parent and the Senko and the child sat round a table just as they would. I think she even took the tablecloths, just as they would at nursery, and it did work. So, because children with special educational needs often compartmentalise, so they'll do one thing at home and they'll do something different at nursery. I mean, they can even compartmentalise that slippers are slippers at home, but they don't recognise them as slippers in another environment. So it's the same with skills. They might do lots of puzzles at home and don't do puzzles with you. I mean, that's often normal as well. Children often will do one thing at home, one thing at preschool, but with a child with special educational needs, it perhaps is more marked, and it's important to break down those barriers, the barrier between home and the setting.